Anyone with even a passing knowledge of autism knows about our sensory challenges. It's one of the easiest facets of autism for non-autistic people to relate to. Everyone knows what too loud or too intense means, so sensory differences have become a popular starting point for anyone who wants to explain what being autistic is like. I'm Quinn, and I'm autistic, and I write about autism for a living, so I keep an eye on what's being said about us in the media. Everyone's heard about our so-called superpowers now. But if you watched any listicle or did you know video about autism, and you'll usually hear about how most meltdowns are caused by sensory overloads, usually with a vertigo-inducing video full of echoing voices and static. Those blurry, noisy videos have come to define how many people see the suffering of autism that charities and demagogues alike like us to keep looking at. That's because overloads are all they can see. It's what sums up sensory stress for them. Very few seem to have a clue about what's going on inside us. There's far more to the sensory issues that autistic people deal with daily than just overloads. Enough to make 2 videos out of, in fact. So why not get yourself comfortable and join me for part 1 of our deep dive into the mysteries of autistic sensory stress. Why am I making 2 videos about sensory stress when I only made 1 about the emotional equivalent? Well, it's because we have 2 different kinds of senses to get stressed by. Perceptive senses are the ones we usually think about. Sight, hearing, touch and the like. They're our primary source of feedback about the world outside our bodies. They're our interface with the real world, if you like. But we also have interoceptive senses that tell us about what's going on in our own bodies. Things like thirst, hunger, aches and pains, or our proprioception, our sense of posture and movement. They're our internal monitoring system. Both kinds of senses come with their own issues that can be managed if we know what we're looking for. Today, we're taking a closer look at the first type, perceptive sensory stress. What should we be looking out for if we want to make our sensory stress less of a problem? I'm not going to patronise you by explaining sensory overloads to you. They're kind of self-explanatory, and those meltdown videos usually do a fair job of getting across the intense emotion, pain and confusion of overcharged hearing and sight. They're a reasonable allegory more than an accurate representation of the experience for most of us, but the first-person perspective they're usually filmed from does help convey the palpable sense of helpless panic. Any one or more of our senses can be overloaded, not just sight and sound, and we don't have to be oversensitive for something to upset our sensory apple carts. Any unusual or unexpected stimulus can set off the unease and confusion that could eventually lead to a meltdown if sustained. Someone suddenly banging a tea tray next to us has a very different impact on our senses to the low droning buzz some of us hear coming from some electrical appliances. But both can be just as bothersome if they're sustained and we can't neutralise them. I'll be breaking overloads down further in a later video, but for now I'm going to bundle them all together into our first category of overload stress. If a sensory meltdown or a shutdown has us boiling over, then it's overload stress that provides most of the heat. It's not the same for everyone, but it's quite common to feel overload stress in a very physical way. I had to buy a new suit for a funeral last December and made the mistake of going to the local shopping mall right in the middle of Christmas shopping season. Alone. I really tried to cope with the onslaught of people and chatter and kids, and food smells, body odour and cheap perfume. Thousands of twinkling lights, screaming kids, chattering adults, and a dozen different jaunty songs blaring out, one from every shopfront. I started to feel like the guy in the horror movie on his way down to the basement after everyone told him not to. It was just minutes before my breathing got short and burning in my chest. My ears were ringing, heart was pounding, a river of sweat trickling down my back. I was nauseous and dizzy, whilst my temples throbbed and veins in my neck stood out like a weightlifter trying for their personal best. I was moments away from a full-on meltdown or collapse when I finally got out of there. It's no coincidence that lots of those "What a Meltdown Feels Like" videos are set in malls and retail parks, I can tell you. But, like with the stress feelings we talked about in the last video about emotional stress, overload stress is just the headline act, the poster boy of the show. Overload stress is a very big deal, don't get me wrong, but it's only the most visible of autistic sensory stresses, the one everyone can point at and make notes about. But there's 3 other distinct sources of sense-related stress that most autists deal with every day. Potentially more if we were to include synesthesia, but that will get its own video. Now, this means it's the boring bit where I take 30 seconds to ask for your support. My work on autism and the videos I make about it will stop if I can't get enough support to pay my bills. There's no big pharma companies, university funds or corporate sponsors putting money on the table and food in my belly. Just you guys and the little that comes from YouTube ads. So, please do me a favour and do the whole like, subscribe and comment thing. But especially share my work if you want me to keep doing it. If you can afford it, there's plenty of ways to bung me a few quid to help out too. You can leave a one-off as a super thanks here on YouTube, or a donation on Ko-fi, or make it more personal and regular on Patreon, where you can get ad-free versions of my work and the odd extra bit too. Links to all of those are in the description. Now, back to the video. This next one might raise the odd Sid James-style cackle from one or two of you. But it's one of those awkward times where the very best word for the job has another, better-known meaning. Sensory impotence is the anxiety we feel when we have to face sensory problems that could have been avoided. It might be because of obligation, rules, being physically cornered, or even just because we didn't know how. This is rife in the workplace and in public spaces we have to spend time in. When I worked in offices, I struggled with fluorescent lights and people chattering around me, both of which made my job much more difficult. In my last full-time job, I was finally given a desk next to a window, on the edge of an open-plan office away from most of the noise, and I was allowed to wear headphones whilst I was working. It made a world of difference, yet it was simple and cost the company nothing. It took me years to get those accommodations in place, though, because most employers still flatly refuse to acknowledge that our sensory needs are worth their time. If you're struggling with too much or not enough sensory input, but you have no power or ability to fix the problem, then you're feeling sensory impotence. When things got too much for me in the shopping mall, I had options to make it better. I didn't have to buy my suit there on that day. I always had the option to leave if it got too much and shop somewhere else or online. Having the freedom to walk out meant the feeling of sensory impotence was nowhere near as intense as it would have been otherwise. We're not always so lucky. If I'd have been trapped in there, by force or by necessity, I'd have popped like a stressed-out balloon. Now, you might think that sitting in a hospital waiting room would be easier, because there isn't as much going on there. They can still be loud, smelly places full of people invading my personal space, but they're definitely not in the same league. However, I could leave the mall whenever I wanted. Not so much when I'm at the hospital. My need to see my doctor keeps me trapped there while sensory mosquitoes bite up my flesh and buzz out my brain. I can't put headphones on and shut my eyes like I want to, because I have to watch or listen for my name being called, so I have to just put up and shut up or leave and miss my appointment. Sensory impotence can raise the temperature of any sensory stressor, amplifying it beyond the impact it might have had if we had the option of walking away or toning it down. So it's our number 2 source of autistic sense-related stresses. Holmes and I turned our attention from the decayed grounds of the Great Hall and proceeded along a dark corridor, our footsteps echoing in melancholy cadence. Presently, I reached a heavy oak door and, grasping the tarnished handle, pushed it open to reveal a pitch-dark chamber beyond. "Holmes!" I called. "Shall I strike a light?" My companion's voice came sharply from the shadows behind me. "On no account, Watson. Put away your matches at once." "Why ever not?" I asked, turning in some astonishment. Holmes stepped nearer, his aquiline profile just visible in the dim light filtering through the cracked shutters. "Because, my dear fellow," he said in that tone of patient instruction he so often employed with me, "this house was built upon reclaimed marshland. I can smell the seepage of marsh gas all about us. A single spark may render the entire place a veritable furnace. Wait here, whilst I fetch the caretaker." He was gone before I could protest, his quick, soundless steps receding down the corridor. I confess that I found the gloom oppressive and the stillness intolerable. After several moments, I began to pace restlessly. "Marsh gas indeed," I muttered under my breath. "I smell nothing of the sort. Holmes and his infernal caution. We have no time to waste fumbling in the dark." I looked back on that moment with some regret. Sensory contradiction is the conflict that comes about when the sensory observations of an autist don't match with those of the people around them. It's the "you say X, they say Y, and you must be wrong because you're the weird one" scenario, basically. It's not often as dramatic as the cartoony example I did just now, but it's an everyday occurrence for most autists in one form or another. My hearing gets me into trouble all the time. Sometimes I think I hear people talking about things openly, but only find out they were meant to be a secret after I've dropped them in it. Sometimes I'll walk into a busy room and start untangling all the conversations and little stories happening around me. I'm not eavesdropping, not trying to hear people's business, it just happens. It was a long, painful road learning to keep quiet about anything I hear that isn't directly said to me, because people can get very nasty. But that might make you think I've got autistic superhearing. It's a fair assumption, but that's not the whole story. When I'm talking to someone directly, one-to-one, and they're speaking right at me, it's really hard for me to understand them if I can't see their lips moving. So, of course, I say, "Pardon?" a lot, and when I'm looking at their mouths, I'm not giving them that precious eye contact. On one hand, I have people seeing me untangling multiple conversations from strangers in a bar, but then I can't understand what my friends are saying to my face if they cover their mouths. Most folks can cope with one or the other extremes, but when I give them one and the other, it seems to get all uncanny valley for them. What starts with weird looks and embarrassing questions ends up, ultimately, in distrust. However it comes about, though, sensory contradiction is what happens when someone else tells us we're imagining things or has a go at us for missing something our senses missed off. Often it's easily resolved and we can all have a laugh about it, and sometimes it is really helpful. But it can also be the starting point of neurotypical denials, gaslighting, and long-standing grudges. Sensory contradiction is mainly a social form of sensory stress because it stems directly from the incorrect assumptions and assertions of other people, not an internal critical process. And so is this last one, even though it's experienced entirely alone. Sensory self-censorship isn't just a tongue twister in waiting. It's what we do to ourselves after being constantly battered by sensory contradictions, what we were just talking about. It's the internal anxiety that comes from anticipation and mitigation of our sensory differences to prevent social consequences. It's also what's right behind one of the most painful masks most autists have to wear in public. This is more than self-correction, it's self-denial. I said just now that I learned the hard way not to share things I've overheard that weren't said to my face. That is sensory self-censorship in the raw. I'm also really sensitive to biological smells, especially when something's gone off or not been cleaned for a long time. And I was still in short trousers when I learned how bad an idea it is to tell someone they're getting a bit ripe. I only ever did it to help them out, in my mind, but they didn't like it. But learning to keep my trap shut was a lot easier than teaching myself to control my gag reflex, resist the urge to screw up my eyes, and stop my nostrils from twitching. Self-censorship is the stress we put upon ourselves to conform to the sensory standards people around us expect us to. It means we can never be the one to notice anything first, just in case we get told we're making it up. We start to wait for someone else to notice, then join in with them, or forever hold our peace. After the anxiety of self-censorship has had a few years to eat away at our self-esteem, some of us end up terrified of ever coming forward with an observation or a warning before someone else does. But it also means developing a ninja-like self-control of all our sensory reactions if those masks we're forced to wear are going to keep us completely safe. The slightest slip in our act, a twitch here or a barely heard gasp there, could expose us in an instant. The easiest way to avoid it is to mask it, to play ignorance and normalcy to the best of our ability, so that's what we do. But the stress of holding back our discomfort and pretending not to notice anything new takes a heavy toll. Bear in mind, this is only one aspect of the masks most autists wear to get by, and I don't know anyone who wouldn't rather just drop the pretense to just be accepted for who they are. None of us wants to self-censor ourselves to the extent that many of us do, because it's stressful for us. All these 4 factors – overload stress, sensory impotence, sensory contradiction, and sensory self-censorship – come together within the sensory element of the autistic triad of distinction. A framework that helps us manage our well-being using tools to understand and express the conflicts and misunderstandings that create barriers in our lives. This time, we've concentrated on stresses that relate to perception, but next time I'll be bringing our internal interoceptive senses into focus. All our neurodivergent senses, along with our differences in emotional processing and our need for clarity and consistency, our sense of veracity, are the 3 areas most likely to put us at odds with other people or our environment. And the triad tries to give us all a better handle on those stresses that ultimately lead to meltdowns and burnout. You can catch up with the first few chapters in the playlist up above if you'd like to learn more, or there's another playlist in the description with some older videos about autistic sensory differences. I hope you found this delve into our potential perceptive pitfalls useful, and that it's made you think a little about how the different forms of perceptive stress have shaped events in your life. I hope you'll join me next time on Autistic, but until then, I'm Quinn, and I'm autistic. Thank you for watching.